Hi, Molly. Thank you for joining us
Hi,
today.
thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Yeah,
Um,
you as well.
I feel like I see little glimpses of you online here and there, like doing all these fabulous things, but we rarely get to actually catch up one on one. So this is fun, exciting.
No, we used to see each other a lot on Clubhouse, but now I think Clubhouse is kind of dead, so it's kind of sad. I thought that was a fun platform, but we all made a quick exit, so ran
they
through the doors.
they've added so many crazy features that when I went back into it recently, I was just like, what is this? It's completely different. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's still kicking, it's still going, but yeah, I'm not on there much anymore.
Yeah, I know. I think I started getting like weird notifications of like people I didn't follow that were like, so and so's online. And I was like, well, this isn't even relevant to me anymore. And that's really when I stopped like joining. But um I still have a lot of the friendships that I like made on Clubhouse like in my real life now, or like in my Instagram
Good.
DMs, which is like as close to real life as like social media gets. So that's a
That's
lot of
true.
fun. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We haven't seen each
good.
other in a long time though. So good to catch up.
I know. Yeah, it's been a while. So let's start off first and foremost, letting people know who you are, what you do, where you're located, kind of a little bit about your story.
Okay, cool. So I'm an interior and architectural photographer. That's hardly unique given your audience. So I consider myself blessed to be counted among such cool people doing such a cool job. I really love what I do. I think it's exciting. Sometimes I get a little bit frustrated about like the photography side of things because I am not a trained photographer. So like I never went to photography school. I actually majored in hospitality with a focus in wine, which doesn't sound obvious, but was totally my like stepping stone into photography. So I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, so I studied wine. I live in Orange County, California. So I'm in the Costa Mesa, Newport area, which is just a lot of fun. My husband and I have like, it's like the best place to live for hobbyists. You know, we like do everything, hunt, fish, hike, go out in the ocean, surf, everything. So we have a lot of fun here. But I think the most fun part about living here in terms of like our job is that I feel, and I may just be such a loyalist to Orange County, but I feel like we're sort of in somewhat of like a mecca of interior design. There's a lot of really cool new builds going on. Spec houses are even interesting. So I get to work with a myriad of clients. I mean, everybody has their own thing that they've got going on. And that's really fun for me as a photographer because I don't like shooting the same thing. It feels like I'm cheating on client A with client B when they're doing the same style. So I get really excited about the diversity of design that we have here. I shoot from Santa Barbara to San Diego, so I don't just work in Orange County, but primarily because this is where I do like run and own my business. A lot of my clients are here, so I get to
Yeah,
work kind of all over the place, which is fun. But my speaker just kind of like did something weird. But anyway, so
we hear you.
that's me and where I live. Okay, good, perfect.
So how did you I'm curious a little bit 'cause I don't think I've ever heard the story. How did you get from hospitality and wine to interior photography?
Yeah, I mean, it's a longer journey than just like the Cliff Notes version, of course, but Cliff Notes version is studied wine in college. I was living in Italy for a year, studying abroad, and I had like just like I think I just literally had like an iPhone, right? I had some dinky camera, like it was nothing serious, and I was taking pictures. My uncle's a photographer, and he was like, wow, you actually have an eye. I'm going to ship you my camera and I want you to use it for the year. So that was really cool. I got like, it was an old Sony Alpha, like old Sony Alpha camera, like A7R, maybe one, like I don't even know, it's like an old one. Had a lot of fun just like learning how to shoot in terms of composition and light and like figuring out what I like. And what I was always doing was shooting buildings. I was always shooting architecture. Of course there were people, but like I wasn't really that into portraits then, and really found like my love for just like taking pictures to promote a business. So at that point, my very good friend Massimo hired me to help him with his PR company. And I just did like a lot of like consulting in terms of like photography for Italian farm businesses. So that was cool. Left Italy, went back to South Carolina, finished my degree at USC, had a hospitality degree, and I had my sommelier certificate. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go into wine because I have this background in Italy working with these farms. And it just felt like kind of this natural thing. Got a job in LA at a PR firm. And it was a typical first job, right? Like my boss was always on my ass and she was awesome. She was a very hardworking woman. And she just was kind of like, work harder, do better, do more, with really, really menial tasks. So I was kind of like this very high level thinker working on just like reading magazines. Like I would read page for page, just like of an article, looking for like a buzzword or a keyword that like fit one of our clients. And that was really difficult work for me because I'm not so detail oriented like that. And I fell in love with the photos because I was going through, stacks of magazines. And I was like, okay, well, the only thing I can really do to keep myself interested in this job is fall in love with these photographers' work. So I started to pick up the fact that there was an industry for photographing wine as a product and photographing wineries and telling that story visually. And I, at that point, had given my uncle back his camera, of course, didn't keep that. I did not own a camera, and I was making at that time $30,000 a year. My salary was $30,000. So my paycheck was $1,311 twice a month, I think. And I was commuting from Orange County to Santa Monica every day. And I was like, I'm not making enough money to want to stay. I'm not making any money really to even cover. One check goes to gas like every month. I think that I just need to quit this job because it's not doing enough for me financially to stay, and go figure out this thing. And this thing being like photography. And I had a vision then that I wanted to shoot wineries and shoot for businesses. And I just didn't know how to get there. And then began my like long dark wood of error. So like I basically shot for 2.5 years of like just anything. I did anything that I could get paid for. It was great because I learned how to shoot everything. You can throw me in a wedding, I still know how to do it. But I really wasn't happy until a mentor of mine asked me to send him a sample of my interior and architectural work. At that point, I was really proud of like 5 images that are horrible. Like I couldn't even show them to you. And so I sent him those pictures and he basically was like, no, never mind. Like you can't assist me. And I was kind of like, shoot, like what did I do wrong? How can I be better? So my mom's an interior designer, and I don't have like those kinds of parents that are like, here's tons of money and we're just going to like bankroll your career or anything like that. But she did give me an opportunity to shoot her houses. And I'm really grateful for that because she basically went from working with a really great photographer to working with me. And I wasn't good. And I learned how to I really cut my teeth on her properties. And then that led into shooting some real estate stuff. And I really cut my teeth there, moved into interiors and architecture. And that 5 years later has become, last week, I just shot my first winery. So, I mean, it all works out. It took a long time, or 2 weeks ago, I guess. 2 weeks ago, I shot my first winery. It took a long time and it was a long process, but it was kind of, it wasn't maybe a natural step or very obvious, but it really has been my goal this entire time to do that. So, yeah, that's how I kind of went from wine to interior photography. And I don't think that I'm going to become a winery photographer by any means. It was a goal that I had set for myself a long time ago, and I got to realize it. So, but I'm going to stay in interiors. I really like interior design. This is like totally my home, but It was something really cool to kind of realize that goal.
Well, that's exciting. Congrats. I did see glimpses of that on Instagram. So that was really exciting.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Yeah, I think most photographers can relate to that period of shooting just whatever gets money in the door. I know I've had that. I think most of us have gone through that where you're just like, whatever you need, wedding, babies, families, product, whatever, I will shoot it. And so I think that's super relatable. And another thing you said that stuck out, that I've said this a lot, and I think it's so hard for people to realize the reality of it is it takes so long. Like it takes so much longer than you think to go from step A to step B. And I think we go into things thinking, oh, it's going to be great. I'm going to do this 1 or 2 shoots, and then I'm going to like catapult to this. But it does take years. And and I think for some people, like I think 5 years is fantastic. I think for some people it would take 10 years. I think for some really lucky folks, it might take 3 or 4, but it's literally years of effort before you start kind of like realizing that you're doing things that you were hoping to do.
Yeah. And I do think that it's like compound experience, right? So I look at everything in 2.5-year cycles, just because in my life that has been the cycle. I don't know if that's for everybody, but I pretty much operate in 30-month cycles. So 30 months of just like grinding, and then 30 months of like, okay, this is my groove, and then 30 months of innovation, and then 30 months of whatever the next thing is. That's kind of how I've seen my life go. With that though, I've also seen that 5-year mark, those 60 months, that's where you really get to see and get really playful with your goals and be like, okay, I'm going to say something crazy and stupid and totally doesn't matter, and I'm going to shoot a winery one day. Okay, that like isn't a goal that matters, but it's the little things that get you there that are the things that matter along the way. So setting just something silly as a goal can be really, really impactful for the journey along the way. And for me, it's the compounding experience. So compounding on my own experience, compounding on the perception of my experience. I think that my husband owns his own business too. I always think about like, okay, you close one deal or you get one shoot, the next shoot or the next deal will be 1% or 0.5% better than that last one, because you're always compounding, you're always growing. So while it doesn't feel like over 5 years, it may be from day 1 to like the last day of year 5, it might not feel like there was, oh my God, that took so long. Yeah, but you're not still in year 1. You did make it to year 5, and I think that now after year 5, the growth that you'll experience in year 6 could be the total growth of years 1 to 3, just because of how things compound. If you believe in like going slow, and I think if you believe in just like sticking with things, you're going to see that growth really fast. So I believe for myself, I'm in year 6. I believe that year 6 has gone so much faster than like 4 and 5. And I anticipate that like 7 to 10 are going to be really interesting years, not in terms of my career, but just my life. Like, okay, maybe in the 7 to 10 year range of my business, I could have a kid, and that could be a whole new phase of business that like is not something that I'm used to. And I might restart that whole cycle of going back to year 1 of like, now I need to learn how to do this on top of this. And I think that there's a lot of female photographers who I look up to that I'm excited to engage with as mentors at that point, but it will be a whole new period. And then it's going to compound by the second kid, I'm going to totally have it dialed. So, my encouragement, I guess, in that is to new photographers. And I talk to a lot of new photographers. It's like, you're not going to stay here. You're not going to like stay in your first shoot. You're not going to stay in your first client. Like there's going to be a second shoot. There's going to be a second client. There's going to be a second publication. So, you don't stay there. Just because you're there now doesn't mean that that's where you're going to be tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I completely agree with all of that. It's funny that you mentioned the cycles. In my life, I've noticed a 7-year cycle, and it seems long, but it's like 7-year phases of like, I'm on like my 3rd career. I'm on my 2nd business. I'm in my 3rd or 4th reiteration of my career. And it kind of has all been around the 7-year-ish mark. which makes me wonder what's going to happen in another 3 or 4 years when Grow Studio is 7. But it's totally true. And the goal setting has been huge. When I started my business, and we're kind of like not even getting into our topic yet, but this is really good
No,
stuff.
I like it though. Yeah, I like it.
When I started my photography business, once I realized, I think probably about a year or a year and a half in, I realized I don't want to be a Jane of all trades. I want to kind of be able to niche into a certain area. My design experience led me to interiors and architecture. When I realized that, I had from day one set myself a 5-year limit of, if my business isn't showing growth, like to be like consistent growth with by year 5, I'm calling it quits. The photography thing isn't working. And I remember year 4 anniversary, when my business turned 4, I was like, it's now or never. This last year is going to fly by, and I have to take the risks that are going to get me to what I want. And I completely rebranded and I went all in, like balls to the wall. I'm like, I'm an architectural photographer, period, end of statement, nothing else. And I completely rebranded. And within 6 months, I saw the difference in all of the inquiries that were coming my way.
Absolutely.
But I think it's so important to have those goals and to have that vision. And for me, it was like, if I just make it to 5 years, I'm golden. And if I take that risk and actually define what I am as a photographer, I had to trust that it was going to pay off. And it does. Like, you just have to take that leap. You have to take that stance. But the goal setting is huge. That goal setting. And for me, the time limit on the goals, having some sort of vision of like when, or like by a certain number of years, that's a big motivator too. So,
I remember, I don't know what day it was, but I also remember the day that I said, okay, enough of high school seniors and weddings and engagements. I'm shooting interiors. And it was because I had a photographer who I was second shooting under. Her name's Sarah Weir, and she's a portrait photographer now. She lives in Reno, and she was a wedding photographer at the time. I don't know if she still does weddings. She's 100% film. She is one of the most creative photographers I've ever seen. She photographs like everything's an oil painting. It's just like, she takes such care about her work. And she gave me the best thing ever, which was on a phone call. We were just talking like this, just business and life. And I think she had 5 kids. And so I really looked up to her. And she said, Molly, I just think you're squandering an opportunity by shooting weddings and working for me when you could be shooting for your mom and doing interiors and learning that. And she basically, I had at that point a pretty good little portrait business. I mean, I still get inquiries from people. Can you shoot my wedding? Or I'm having a new baby, or can you do Christmas cards? And, I gently and I graciously say thank you and point them to another photographer. Now I don't do that work anymore, but she encouraged me to go all the way back down to square one and like completely reset my business. Luckily, I had done it before, so I'd already grown a photography business. Kind of to your point of like, this is my 3rd business. I mean, I count all my photography as one business, but my growth was so much faster once I said I'm an interiors and architectural photographer. I try and be really evergreen in terms of like when I'm in public talking about how long I've been doing this, but I think that the year that I really said I'm an interiors and architectural photographer was only 2018. So it has not been long that I've been doing just this. But I feel like I look at my work and I feel like it looks further along than what is that? 3.5 years, So because I have been through that process of honing before, I now know what to do in terms of self-criticism, self-reflection, asking for feedback, getting mentors, working through the equipment stuff, the technical stuff, and how to get clients, which I think is kind of brings us full circle on what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And before we do dive into that, you kind of touched on something that I think is super important, that all this sort of runaround that we tend to do in the early phase of our photography business, I think it's crucial. Like, I encourage people to
It
try,
is.
because I learned so much by doing all the work that I no longer wish to do. I learned
Yeah.
so much about how to work with people, how to think on the fly, how to problem solve, how to deal with difficult situations, how to deal with my
Lighting.
own
Like, what
frustrations.
about lighting? When you're
Yeah,
shooting everything from weddings to babies to products to restaurants, I mean,
you have to get
you
creative.
have you have to friggin' know your stuff if you're going to get paid. I mean, those yeah, that runaround, I love that term. I'm going to use that from now on. That runaround phase is so vital to
It's crucial.
how
You learn
how
so
you're going to
much.
be, yeah,
Yeah.
and just
And I,
how you're going to develop, and how you
well,
what's your learning pattern, how are you
yeah.
going to learn something, like what's your mentality about being vulnerable and learning new.
Yeah. Being
I
vulnerable
think
and
we
learning.
disconnected.
Yeah,
You
that's
are.
crucial. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we got you back. Um, yeah,
Yes.
and for me, I think in work and in life, it's just as important to know what you don't want as to know what you do want. So I
Mhm.
think, like, I know with all my heart, I do not want to shoot another wedding ever again in my life. But I know that because I've gone through them.
Yeah.
And like, it's so important for me to know that, so that when somebody approaches, I can be like, in my head, I'm like, I've tried it. I know it's not a good solution for me. I know it doesn't work. And that's super important for me to know,
Yeah.
because it's what it's what gets you to what you do want. So
Yeah.
anyway, okay, we could go on about this forever, I think, but
I know. I love it.
so I really wanted to talk with you about your client experience with kind of screening new clients, potential clients, onboarding, and kind of your approach to their experience of working with you, because I feel like you are a photographer who has given it so much thought, and you have planned it out to such detail that you don't see that in a lot of photographers. And you're very intentional about the experience that you put out for the potential clients from the moment they go to your website. So I'd love to hear a little bit about, first of all, like, is that a big part of your business? I mean, we kind of touched a little bit. You mentioned that you're more of a business mind than a photography mind. So I think that kind of alludes to it, but how big a part of your business do you consider that? Because I think for a lot of us, it kind of becomes an afterthought.
Right. So for me, it is the whole business. um, I I'm a person who runs a business, and the business that I run happens to be photography. Um, that is not to say I don't love photography. There's most days when I'm behind the camera and I'm shooting something kick ass, I have a visceral, physical, emotional reaction to the subject matter that I get very excited about it. So sometimes I complain about photography, and I think there's a misconception that I don't like being a photographer. That's not true, but sometimes I do butt my head against photography in a way that it looks like I don't like it. I really, really do love business systems, processes, business development, strategy, and client care so much. I think that comes from having, I mean, I don't totally know where it comes from, but I think in part, I mentioned that I majored in hospitality in college. And I was actually just joking with my mom that I said something like it was kind of a waste of a degree if you're actually going into hospitality, because at my university, they made you do 400 hours of working in a hotel, a
Mm.
restaurant, or a club. I worked in country clubs. So that was my, practicum. And but I kind of run my business like a country club though sometimes. Like it's very, I mentioned I did a little write up for you and I said Four Seasons. I should have called it the country club. I really like the idea of people feeling very at home in my business, feeling very taken care of. I'm wandering a bit. But I did mention my mom, what a waste of a degree. And as I said it, I was kind of like, wait, no, because I use my degree every day in my photography business. It's just not obvious. I would not recommend majoring in hospitality if you actually want to work in hotels. Just go work in hotels, get in your associate's degree or something. You don't need a necessarily 4-year degree for that, but we'll spend $100,000 or whatever college costs these days. So hospitality is not something that naturally, that people gravitate toward naturally when they are running their business. It's not a word people use outside of the hospitality industry, but I think it's a huge missed opportunity if you don't at least examine that industry, or if you don't work in it. So if you've been have you ever waited tables or bartended?
I haven't. I was spoiled and I went straight to like office jobs. I was brought up with like engineers. So
you're very lucky.
I went straight to like technical like office work, but
okay.
I escaped that.
Well, let me just paint the picture then of waiting tables. So you're in a restaurant and it's like you're basically in a black hole, or you're tending bar, whatever you're doing. When you're working hospitality, to get out of there, to leave and go home, leaving and going home is probably one of the best parts of the night, but the next best part of the night is counting your tips. And the best way to get tips is to be really caring and kind to people. The best thing about people is that they have a bullshit meter. They're going to know when that care and that level of attention isn't honest. They're going to like see straight through that. So if you're going to be really good and make really good tips, you're going to be genuinely caring. Now in my photography business, I don't work for tips, right? So I have a rate, I have a price. What I do work for is return clients, because every single client that returns to me is a lead or a new project that I don't have to spend time doing business development on. Mm-hmm. So I really believe in hospitality for my business. And I gave you some links, some books. I'm going to talk about them, but the number one book that I recommend people read, whatever business they're in, but especially photography, is Setting the Table by Danny Meyer. He writes about the restaurant industry and how he grew his restaurants and why they're so successful. And they're successful because of how he makes people feel at his restaurant. So he famously owns Shake Shack. That might be like one that people know, or he started Gramercy Tavern in New York. There's a lot of different restaurants that he's had. Blue Smoke, that's another one. But I love this quote that he has in his book. Hospitality is the foundation of my business philosophy. Virtually nothing else is as important as how one is made to feel in any business transaction. Hospitality exists when you believe the other person is on your side. The converse is just as true. Hospitality is present when something happens for you, but it's absent when something happens to you. Those two simple prepositions, for and to, express it all. So when I get a new client who wants to hire an interior photographer, I ask them every single time, have you worked with an interior photographer before? Yes or no? When they say yes, and I ask them straight up, why are you looking for a new photographer? Usually it's this concept of something happening to them. Mm-hmm. And that's not the language that they use, but broad strokes, it is. As a photographer, if you are leaving your thumbprints all over your client's work, something is happening to the client, not for the client. And so you may see in my work a range of styles. There's some that's like really bright. There's some that's really moody. There's some that's more neutral and doesn't have a lot of color. The reason is that because I want my photography as a service to happen for my clients. And if they say, Molly, I really like this about my project, and I really like this about my project, and I really want this to be captured, I will listen to them and execute on that, instead of being like, oh, well, you should probably work with, like, I only do moody. So, I think that you should work with so-and-so to get light and bright. If the design is good and the designer matters to me, and the design is really something specific that I want to capture, I will shape my photography style to fit their design needs. The consequences of that is that my portfolio looks all over the place. That's okay. I think that that's okay to some degree, because it's still me behind the lens, and hopefully you can figure out that it's me in terms of my eye. There are some non-negotiables that I have, but they're very simple in terms of style. So all that to say, hospitality is the core of client care. When they come to my website, when they interact with me and go through my screening process, everything about my business process is going to be about my client and their style, their goals, their objectives. And if I figure out what their problem is and I can solve it, then I know I'm the right person for them.
Nice. Yes. One thing I've wholeheartedly believed the entire time I've owned my business is that first and foremost, I'm a service provider. I'm not, I don't consider myself an artist or photographer before that. I consider myself a service provider first. If I'm not serving my client, then I'm just doing freelance art. If I'm getting paid to provide a service, I'm there to serve them. So I feel like that your approach about hospitality, I've never thought of it in terms of hospitality, but that's the same idea. It's the same approach. So
absolutely,
I love that, because at the end of the day, if you have clients, you're not a photographer at large who's just shooting what they want because that's their artistic choice. You are being hired by somebody to provide something for them through your eye, but you are serving them. And so I wholeheartedly believe that. So I love that approach about hospitality. I'm totally going to check out that book because you've piqued my interest. So that kind of leads,
book.
Yeah, it seems like it. It kind of leads into my kind of next question, which was, a lot of people are probably going to be wondering like where to start. Like, I, like many, have some process set up, and I feel like I've probably looked at it a little bit more than others. You've looked at it way more in detail than I ever have, but there are people who don't have much of a process set up for their clients. So if they're kind of starting from scratch, what do you recommend? You mentioned one book. I'm sure there are others, but what's kind of like the first step, I guess?
So yeah, these steps, like this process that you're kind of getting at, it's a three-prong, what would the expression be? Three-prong sword? No, I don't know.
Three-prong approach, maybe?
Three-prong approach, sure. I was trying to think of a good metaphor there. So hospitality for me is the most important one. Next, second important is going to be business processes. So I have another book that I recommend, E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. It's a rough read. Like, I'm just going to say that it's not comfortable, and it's quite, I think that it's kind of an awkward read, but it's very, very good in terms of like the meat that you can get out of it. And then the third is, I think, the Bible for all photographers, the best business practices for photographers. Every photographer that comes to me that's like, can you tell me something? I'm like, buy this book. Like, that's my first piece of advice, always and forever. It's a great companion piece if you're going to read any kind of business development book. So I really love that book. And those three things, those three concepts of hospitality, business processes, and professionalism kind of form the tactics that I use to say like, okay, what do I want to do today? And unfortunately, because I live in 2022, what I want to do today is make money. And in order to do that, to make the most amount of money in the easiest way possible, I have to really examine how fast I can get that money. So that sounds really crass. And I think that that's something I want to acknowledge up front. Like, I don't like how ugly that sounds, but that's the reality of it. In order to have more time doing what I love, which could be photographing really, really sick interior design projects, or could just be like walking my dog, I need to shrink the amount of time that I'm spending finding new clients and photographing those projects. So I have a process by where The most important thing is that when somebody reaches out to me on my website, they get an immediate response from me where it's an immediate response where they will be able to schedule a time to talk to me as soon as they want. Or I should say, as soon as I'm available, that they want. Because I can't make myself available all the time, but I do try and give like a very, very like broad window of availability where we can talk, because what people love more than anything, and as you're probably experiencing on your end, having the Grove and developing this content, or even just singularly in this interview, people love to talk about themselves. So I take advantage of that, like right off the bat. And I give them 2 ways in which to do that. This is part of the process. The first is that I conduct a written interview with them. I want to ask them questions like what their goals are as an interior designer, how long they've been in business, how they would describe their style, a myriad of questions, a bunch of different things. That's really going to help me figure out, am I the right photographer for them? Asterisk, sidebar, other page. I don't work with designers whose work, one, I don't think I could photograph well, whose personalities I don't get, and whose inspirations or their stylistic inspirations are not mine. Like, I've done it before where I've worked with designers whose work I just basically don't like. And it sucks because you do a bad job. You get tagged in the pictures on Instagram and you're like, can I remove the tag? Like, I don't want anyone to see that I've done this. And thirdly, this is super important. If you're an interior photographer, what you look at is other interior photographers. And you look at technique. So we look at technique as photographers. We look at lighting, we look at composition. We understand, maybe we're looking at focal depth. We're pixel peepers. We're not actually looking at the design in most pictures. And I love design, and I'm still looking just at the photography strategy or the photography technique. What our clients look at is design. And so as an interior photographer, if you're shooting shitty houses, don't post them, because you're not going to get that next level photographer. Of course, if all you have is a small portfolio to start with, post it, use what you can. But I do believe that in phase 2, next level of your business, be really, really, really aware of who you're working with and what their work looks like. It might not be everybody's cup of tea, but the thing that matters most is that it's your cup of tea. So if you like it, shoot it. That's part of this written interview that I do, just to come back to that. Then after the written interview, I have the phone call with them, and I have the written interview. I read it. I Instagram stalk them. I spend about 20 minutes, 25 minutes before each call, just figuring out who this person is and how they perceive themselves, where they're going, and how they talk to their client. Now, this is super important. How they talk to their ideal client is language that I want to use in my call with them, because they're going to feel very understood. Now, it's not inauthentic to do that. Use your client's language. This is business. This isn't personal, right? So when I'm talking to them and I ask them, what do you want? And they say, well, I want more Instagram followers. Bullshit. Doesn't cut it. What do you want? I want more Instagram followers because I want a more profitable business, because I want to pay for my kids to go to college. Okay, that's what you want, right? Like, that's actually what's at the meat of this issue.
Right.
And so I, as a photographer, what can I do to help them pay for their kids' college, right? Like, probably not everything, but I can probably help. And so I have that conversation with them, and we work as a team to really ascertain like what measurable goals there are in the interior design, photography, home building, development process that will get them to a more profitable business. That's the long answer of why that process matters. But every single time I end a call and I say like, okay, do you want to book? The only objection I have ever is price. And that's a really good problem to have. If people are going to object on price, like, you're in a really good position, because not everyone's going to be able to afford you. And I think that that's okay. People are at different points in their lives and they've got personal things, they've got goals. But if you're not getting any other objections, you're in a really good position.
Yeah. There are a couple of things you touched on that I want to make sure people catch. One is you were talking about being selective and kind of leveling up and being mindful of what you're putting out there. And that circles back to what I think we hear a lot. And I think it's advice that we almost like never want to follow because it's not easy, but you need to put out there more of what you want to attract. So if you put out there these shitty projects that you don't want to keep doing, people that do those projects are going to be like, oh, she shoots those kind of projects. I have those. I'm going to reach out to her. That's what you're going to bring in. People who have kick-ass projects are going to see that you shoot all this like crappy stuff and they're going to be like, not for me. So I love that. And I love that you're talking about essentially being on their team, talking with them about their goals. I think that's brilliant. That's fantastic because you're putting yourself on their side. And that goes back to what you're talking about with the hospitality is being on there with them. Right? Yeah, exactly. So couple of questions came to mind. Because I feel like I love doing the phone call in the beginning. I feel like that's also a good way to screen and kind of weed out people who are just price shopping. And it's a way to be like, if you actually want to work with me, take 15 minutes for a phone call. Like if they can't do that, Absolutely. Then there's a bigger issue and they're just not your client. So I love doing the phone call. What's my question? Okay. So when you get to the point where say they have an objection on price, how do you handle that? Is that usually about talking about the benefits or what you are able to do for them? Or how do you approach that objection?
I've become a lot softer in the last 2 years, just post COVID. I know that money's a reality and we're going into, it's very likely that we're going into a recession, and I am not such an asshole about price anymore. When I get somebody who says like, I can't afford it, but their work is so good and I love their work, I will work with them and say, let's split this up into 6 payments, or I'll shoot this for free and I will retain the rights to these images. And as you want to use them, you may buy the image. I'll come up with something that makes sense for me if the designer is my ideal client, which I have very, very, very clearly laid out for myself. I know exactly who my ideal client is. When I get an ideal client across my desk, it's so rare that I typically will break my back to work with them. And then after working with them once, right, because like you can do the interview, the written interview, you can do a phone call. You don't really know what it's like to work with someone until they're breathing over your shoulder, looking at your work. And like, that's like where the rubber meets the road, I think, in terms of like, do I want to work with this person again?
Yeah.
So I've become a lot softer. I don't carry that like 2016, 2018 kind of language of like, you're worth $1 million. Like it's just like not there for me anymore. That's not business advice that like really made a lot of sense for me. And then also when I get somebody who fights me on price and, I don't really feel like they're worth fighting back on, I just say, thank you so much for your time. And I use their data basically, like they've written out their interview. I'm going to like use that. I get something out of working with them, or talking to them. But if they're not going to be worthwhile to me in order to work for free, I'm not going to, or on a payment plan, I'm not going to fight for them anymore. Now, I do want to say this. I do hold one piece of financial pricing conversation thing from like that era that I'm talking about, like that 2018 era, whatever, of money talk.
Mhm.
And that is that I don't discount my price. So like, you're never going to get a cheaper version of me. You're
Yeah.
going to get my full price, or you're going to get me for free. But I don't like cheapen my work to fit someone else's budget. That's not something
Yeah.
that I do. So, yeah, I did get it. Like one of my mentors this morning, he was like, "Do you work for free?" And I was like, "Depends, but yeah, sometimes." Like if the person is really who I want to work with, or there's an opportunity there for me, I will name what I want from it. And even if I don't get it, I knew the risk, right? So, that's how I handle the money
Yeah.
conversation. It's a little bit, honestly, for me, it's a lot more peaceful than
Mhm.
being like, okay, well, why don't we just talk about selling your grandma's house? Like, I just like that's slimy and like doesn't work for me. Um, but it was that I think that there's still a little bit of that left in the world of people that
Yeah.
do
No,
sales.
I'm of a similar thought. I I'm I feel like I'm one of the few people out there that actually says it's okay to shoot something for free the with the sort of side note, the little footnote that you have to be able to leverage it somehow. It has to serve you in other ways that are not financial. If you're not
Mhm.
getting money from it, you have to be getting something else, whether it's a
And you have to
relationship,
name that value. Like your client
right?
can't name that value.
No, that has to come from you, and you need to go into it knowing why you're shooting it for free and being completely at peace with that. I think that's a big part of it. Um and I also agree, I don't discount. What I always suggest to people in kind of in lieu of that is if they have, say you're charging 2,000, they have a budget of 1,000. I do think there's a possibility for saying, well, for 1,000, this is what I can offer. And you
Mhm.
greatly reduce what they are getting. Um, but you don't offer them the $2,000 service
Yeah.
for $1,000. So I think there are so many ways that you can work with that, where you can do the
The only,
payment plan, you can kind of move things
yeah.
around, but
For
and
me, with the budget of 1,000 versus 2,000, just while we're on that
yeah.
specific scenario, because this is a very valuable conversation. I feel like this is a good one. Just as a different point of view, I probably still would say no.
Mhm.
Reason being is I'm at the point in my career where I likely could book every single day.
Mhm.
I don't, because I need downtime. I need editing time. I've played with having editors. I like having editors when I'm really, really busy. And
Oh, did we lose
I
you?
need editing time.
Oh, there you are.
Um, oh, sorry. I was saying the reasons why I don't shoot, like
Yeah.
even at a lesser rate, even if it's like they get less,
Mhm.
they may get less, but I still have to pack up my car and show up. And I
Yeah.
think that like that to me is like, I really, I, I really don't want to at a certain price, like do that, because
Mhm.
if it's $1,000, yeah, I sound like a dick for saying I
Well,
wouldn't shoot for $1,000.
well,
I
I think
wouldn't,
I think it goes
because
back.
that day I could get an opportunity to shoot for four, and so
Well,
I'm really cognizant of like what's coming in my inbox, but it could be
yeah.
at that point in my like career now. You know what I mean?
And I think that goes back to who is the client? Is this somebody that you
Yeah.
want to make that effort for? And also, I think it's super important that we all have a minimum. We all have a number that we don't shoot below. Whatever,
Mhm.
whether it's 300 or 3,000, we all have that number where we're like, I can't justify getting in my car, packing stuff up and charging everything and then unpacking, blah, 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 for less than this number. So I think that goes back to what you're saying, where like you wouldn't go down to 1,000 because you might be able to shoot for 4. I think that's where we have to feel out, is it important enough for me to work with this client? And is it meeting my minimum that I feel comfortable making any effort for?
Another thing that I tell my like mentorship group a lot is to future-proof your business. So let's say right now I would be pretty stoked on making I would be stoked on leaving my house for $1,000. It's honestly not out of the question. I would, but we talked about this at the top of the call. In 2 years, 3 years, 1 year, 9 months, who knows? I could have a baby. And if I have a child that I'm going to likely have to care for, I don't think I'm going to have a full-time nanny. My career isn't looking that golden yet. It will be very difficult and very expensive and very, very straining and stressful to find somebody to watch that child for 3 hours while I go shoot something for 1,000. So to future-proof my business, my reputation and what I want people to know of me is that for me to leave my house, it has to be a certain dollar amount that I could call a babysitter on the fly or something like that.
Yeah.
I wanted there is that piece of it that I think, what do you want your life to look like in 2 years? What do you want your pricing to look like in 2 years? Because people will remember your pricing for 2 years unless you send out an email that says I've updated my pricing every 6 months, which people do. But I think that, if I want my pricing to hold for a while, I'm going to need to think about what I want to make in 2 years. And so that's a part too of like what I consider when I consider doing free or discounted work. Free is a lot easier for me to do than discounted, even in the situation you talked about.
Easier.
Yeah. Free is way easier for me to do because like, I don't want to do the mental gymnastics of someone thinking I'm only worth $1,000 or $800 or whatever it is. That's a psychological tax for me that I really hate to do and be like, oh my God, am I not worth what I think I am? Like,
I feel like there's less of an internal struggle when you shoot something for free and you go into it knowing and choosing to do it for free than when you've kind of gone back and forth on numbers and like reduced numbers in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you're right. It all goes back to, do I really want to work with this person? If I really want to work with them and they say it's $1,000, I'll do a per image price with a minimum buy of 1,000, because then they'll see the full gallery and they'll be like, oh shit, I need every single one of those pictures. I do believe in my work enough that people would want to buy everything, so.
Yeah. I was going to say something and it completely escaped me. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, okay. Oh yeah, the whole sort of knowing what vision you have for your life and stuff. I think that's crucial. I'm somebody who I have planned a lot of my business. I am in business for myself because I know that my priority is to be able to care for my mother. I know that my priority is to be able to be there for my other relatives who are nearby. I know that that's my priority, and to have that flexibility, I have to work for myself. So that's kind of a guiding force for even having a business. So I think just knowing what you want your work to be able to serve for you in your life, what you want it to be able to create as a life for you, I think is super important. That's a part of what we go over. The business of interior photography course from Growth Studio. There's a whole section on pricing, and a big part of it is, what do you want for yourself? What kind of schedule? What sort of lifestyle? And then the market and kind of how you can leverage and all those other things. But having some sort of vision of what you want for yourself is super crucial. So I completely,
numbers are last. Like the numbers come in. That's like the last piece.
In a way, for me, it comes down to like the two big things for me when it comes to pricing is, if you are meeting your absolute financial needs, meaning like if you have food on the table, a roof over your head, your bills are paid, and if you're at peace with what you're making, if you feel valued and all your finances are taken care of, at the end of the day, those are the two must-haves in my
Mhm.
book. Like it needs to serve your financial needs, and you need to feel valued. If those
Yeah.
things are met, everything else is sort of secondary to that. There's flexibility. So I think, I mean, it's also interconnected, but I wanted to mention
Yeah.
like the whole lifestyle thing is super important. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And I think like, just to like round that out, the lifestyle of how you work and how you run your business, they really are interdependent. So like making sure that when you're at work, you're enjoying it by working with the right people and doing that process of interviewing your inquiries. If you do that well and you do that thoroughly, then the other piece of your personal life will start to fuse with your professional life. And so that's the benefit that I have of my work, is like, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen so-and-so so long. I have to take them out for a glass of wine, even though they're a client. Like, I want to see my clients, because now, I wouldn't go so far as to say we're like tight friends. I think that can be a little scary. So that's like that's like conversation number 2. But I do really enjoy them, and I want to see them as often as I get the opportunity for, because they're putting food on my table. I'm in a long, circular route putting food on theirs, and we have to take care of each other, and we have to look out for each other. And I think that if your personal life and your professional life are lining up in that way, you're in a really good spot, so that's like a good benchmark. Like, am I doing well in life right now? Like, yes.
I never tell clients this, but one of the things that I always kind of consider after the phone call with them, that initial call, is, would I want to have a glass of wine or a beer with them? Like, would I want to go to happy hour with them and just have a drink and just kind of talk life? Because if it's not somebody that I would want to spend any time with socially, it's probably not a good personality match. So that's always kind of one of my secret filters, is like,
No, that's
would I
great.
hang out with them? Because if you
I've
would,
heard that one.
then it's
I've
going to
heard
be.
that before from somebody after a sales call, and they said, but I don't drink. So I asked myself, would I send them a meme? And I was like, that's so funny.
That's true
I was
too.
like, that's incredible.
I send gifts
So if you
to,
don't drink, the question is, would you send them a meme?
yeah, that's a good one. That's a good way of thinking about it. Okay. We lingered on pricing because it's such a big topic, but I want to get back to the client experience process. So can you run through, especially for those who are sort of starting to dive into this and kind of figuring out their process for themselves, what some of the pieces look like following that phone call, like especially when you're onboarding?
So really bullet point version of this. And also I have to note for myself, I have a call in 14 minutes where I'm going to be going through this, this client process with somebody new today. So I do this about 3 times a week, which is really fun. I stay really fresh on this. But so the bullet points, it looks like this. So somebody's going to inquire on my website. It's going to look like any other inquiry that you're filling out for any other photographer. Immediately you get, I've already gone over this, but I'm just going the full picture. Immediately you get an email from me like, hey, nice to meet you. Thanks so much for reaching out. Let's schedule a time to get on the phone. I'd love to talk with you. I don't share pricing over email. Okay. Boom, schedule a phone call immediately if they schedule the phone call. So that's a filter. They have to be willing to schedule that phone call, as you've mentioned. Schedule the phone call. It's a 25-minute call. Thanks for scheduling the phone call. Okay. Separate email. So calendar, schedule, separate email. Thanks for scheduling the call. Can't wait to get to know you. In the meantime, would you mind filling out this questionnaire? I'd love to get to know about you and your business, and I want to save as much time on the call for you to ask me the questions that you might need to ask me. Okay. That questionnaire goes through. They submit it. I read it. I do my Instagram and website stalking and all the things that I'm going to find out about them. And then we have our phone call. If on the phone call, I feel like they're a fit. Now, this is really crucial because I could automatically send them my pricing right before the call and we go over it. The problem is that my pricing directly links to my booking page. There's a reason for that. So I only send them my pricing if after the interview, after the phone call, I feel like we're a good fit. So I'll send them my pricing.
Do you tell them verbally what your pricing is on the phone call?
So typically what I'll do is I'll have the conversations with them. We're going to go over everything. I know already if I like their design based on what they submit to me. And then if I vibe with them on the call, I just, the word vibe is the only way I can describe it. If there's like
Yeah.
mutual energy being exchanged, I'll say to them, thanks so much. I'd love to go over my pricing with you. I do think that we're a good fit. And I'll be very direct that way. Like, I think that that's something that you can be very direct. This is business. You don't have to like, you know, can I say weird words? You don't have to pussyfoot around things. Just like be direct and be in business
Yeah.
and be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to send you my pricing. Here's what I charge. Here's how it works. Here's how it's structured for the project. And I ask them in their questionnaire, do you have a project that you need to shoot immediately, parentheses, within 4 weeks? If they say yes or no, I'm going to talk to them on the phone call specifically about that project. Okay. So on the phone call, we'll talk about that project. I'll send them my pricing and then I'll say to them, I think that this package is going to be the best option for you and your marketing goals, and your sales goals and all the goals that you have. They say yes or no. Okay. That conversation will happen. If they have questions, I'll explain everything. But typically I don't get no, because at this point I've conditioned them so much that not only do I want to work with them, but they want to work with me. I don't say that I want to work with them unless I get this like flirty business vibe that they want to work with me too. So here's where I invite them home, right? So invite them home. We're going to have a drink. We're going to turn on the record player. And I say at the bottom of the page, you can find my booking, my booking link. And I pretty much end it there. So I say, if you want to move forward, please visit that page. And I can't wait to, I really can't wait to work with you. And I think this is really crucial. I do not handhold them through their booking. They now have agency to work with me, whether or not they want to. Nobody likes a salesy, oily car salesman kind of thing where it's like, I'm going to walk you through every step until you're signing a piece of paper. Don't want to do that. They actually will want to work with me more if I just leave them be to finish that on their own. I typically will get a yes and a booked appointment within 7 business days. That's pretty much my turnaround. And if not, I kind of consider that a dead lead. And I'll circle back in about 30 days and just say, hey, I've been thinking a lot about that project. Like, I'm wondering if you've had it photographed. I'd still like to shoot it. Or sometimes I let it go. Like sometimes I just, it wasn't meant to be and I let it go. At the point that they book though, or they have objections maybe to booking based on my packages, this is important too. I have a shot list rubric. So it is, I list every single room in a house that I can think of, from theater to outdoor dining, whatever it is. I list overall shot, vignette, and detail in little boxes next to every single room. And then there's a guide for how much time it takes me to shoot every single one of those. So 15 to 20 minutes overall, or something like that. I don't remember. 10 to 15 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, and less than 5 minutes. And so if they are really detail oriented and they don't know how much time they want to buy, because that's how my packages are, is how much time they want to buy, they'll list out on this little form that they can print it out and literally go through and tally out how many shots they want in their gallery. And then they have like all the information they need to make the decision on whether or not they want to work with me. So that little piece of paper can be really the deciding factor between me and another photographer, because I'm going to meet their apprehensions with an answer already of like, they're like, how many shots am I going to get in 3 hours? Well, typically it's 14 to 20. And they're like, well, how many for me? Okay, well, fill out this piece of paper and you're going to know exactly. Right. So I meet their apprehension with like a physical, like take home, like piece of homework. And if they go through that, they usually book. I mean, I've never had someone fill that whole thing out and not book. So that is like the overview, the high level / also very detailed client process that I have from inquiry to booking. And then from booking to shooting, there's a whole other process.
That's going to have to be a whole other conversation, but I have a couple of last minute questions because I know you have to go. What do you do because I know some people kind of drag their feet if they book the phone call with you but then they drag their feet on filling out the written questionnaire? Do you go ahead with the phone call without that?
That's only happened once in the last 24 months. It happened last week.
What'd you
And I had
do?
the phone call. I had the phone call with her, and the interview, the written interview is to serve two purposes. One, it's for people who don't want to spend a lot of time on the phone. And two, it's just extra data for me. So it
Right.
doesn't, it doesn't, it's not make or break that they fill that out. But she didn't fill it out. And honestly, I don't even remember her name now. So, I mean, it doesn't work in their favor to not fill it out because they're more forgettable to me. But they can really distinguish their differences from other designers when they do that. A lot of times people will find out that I have this information on them and that they were like really, really forthcoming in that. And they'll be like, can I see my inquiry, like my questionnaire? Like, I feel like I wrote some good stuff in that, and I'll send it to them. Like, this is really key. Like, you should write this on your website. Like, it now becomes like a copy brief and they don't even realize it, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Nice. And then I love that you have that information about how much time for each type of shot. I think that's brilliant. I want to put it out there because I know some photographers who are watching this are going to be like, well, what if I don't know exactly how long it takes me? So I feel like that's something that probably developed a little bit as you had more experience and you
yeah.
got a really good feel of, I know that it's going to take me this much for this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I ballpark it, and I ballpark it on the long side. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, I want people to book a higher package with me. Yes, it would sometimes take me 10 minutes to shoot a big kitchen shot, but that's because I've got the stylist in there. I've got the designer in there. Everybody's working on the same thing. The publicist is like on the phone with me, making sure that I'm getting the right shot list for the magazine that they want to submit this to. Like, there are many pieces at play when I'm like shooting these big shots. So I know that it's going to be 10 to 15 minutes, but lighting, bracketing, all the
Right.
things. Yeah, I guess that came later. But again, you know, as much as I like to be secretive about how long I've been doing this, it hasn't been that long. So it didn't take me that long to figure it out. And it just took paying attention, right? Like, so, you
Right.
know, if I'm shooting a house for 3 hours, I got 21 shots. How much time did I spend doing each shot? Like, and what
Right.
type of shot? And from memory, like this one was longer than this one. And, you know, you kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
You figure it out.
Um,
You could literally time it though if you needed to.
That's true. Yeah. I've never timed it, but you get a feel. You get a feel
Yeah.
for how long it takes for you to do certain shots. Last question, because I know you have to go in a couple minutes. What platform do you use for all the automation? Because it sounds like a lot of it is automated for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I automate everything through Dubsado. I just think that it has like the best capabilities in terms of like customization. So
Mhm.
my Dubsado page doesn't look too different from my website. You know, the client experience, this is super, super crucial. And I definitely want to say this. If you are in the business of photography, you need to be cognizant of your branding and the presentation of all of the documents and everything that you
Yeah.
put out there. Your clients are in the business of beauty and they're paying attention to it. So
Yeah.
hire a graphic designer, hire a Dubsado expert. I use Search and Grow, Vanessa from Search and Grow, to do all of my Dubsado forms and everything. And then my Dubsado, I think, is just like incredibly valuable
Yeah.
in terms of like what you can do with it. So yeah,
Nice.
everything's automated through Dubsado.
And I think even if you end up using a different CRM or a different platform for your paperwork or whatever, it's super important to make sure that it allows you to brand it for your own brand, and
Mhm.
that it meshes well with everything else you're putting in front of them.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
like to, I know we talked about a bunch of different ones. I do like if people are like shopping different CRMs. I like that Dubsado feels a lot like Squarespace. So I can say that like when you're building your forms and everything, it's drag and drop, really comfy. And you can customize it with like HTML and like CSS code, which I don't know about other things, but I've been on the receiving end of like other CRMs things, and like they don't seem as custom and they don't seem as like websitey as Dubsado. And I just like that Dubsado can feel really, really websitey. I don't know
Yeah.
the actual word for that. Websitey probably isn't it.
Websitey works. We'll take it.
Yeah. Well, I
All
have to
right.
jump because I have this call.
Yes. Thank you
So I'll
so
let you, I'm going to
much.
be doing everything I just talked about for the next 25 minutes. So we'll see if
Very
I close
nice.
this one. I hope I do.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to go over it. I'm sure there's going to be another conversation about like the next phases of working with a client.
Oh
So
yeah.
we'll try and find a
Yeah.
time to do that. But this alone, I think is going to be a huge help for people. So thank you, Molly.
Thanks. Yeah, of course. It was great talking with you.
Yeah, likewise. We should talk more often than once every 6 months.
I know. All
All
right. I'll
right.
talk
Well,
to you
have a
soon.
good
Thank you,
one.
Natalia.
Bye.
Bye.